Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Hands Together webinar series. My name is Elina, and I represent Citizens Act in Cyprus. Today's focus will be on the introduction to intergenerational learning. Just to have an idea, the Hands Together webinar series covers a few topics, in particular six, and we will be covering the first one today, which, as I said, is Introduction to Intergenerational Learning. So as a topic overview, today's webinar on the introduction to intergenerational learning will cover the following, which are general introduction and definitions on what intergenerational learning is, the different types of intergenerational programs, which include formal, informal, and community-based. We'll be sharing some benefits of intergenerational learning, which will cover the topics of cognitive, social, and emotional benefits. How intergenerational learning also fosters intergenerational solidarity and inclusion, and we'll be giving some definitions on what these terms mean. And we'll also be sharing some challenges and best practices and recommendations for the future use of intergenerational learning. So what exactly is intergenerational learning? A quote from Ursula von der Leyen says, "The future will belong to societies that can draw strength from the cooperation between generations." So, as a broader definition, it's different generations working together in order for one generation to benefit the other and vice versa. And benefits include both in knowledge and in skills, as we'll see later on as well in the webinar. Some key principles of intergenerational learning include mutual learning, active participation, and strengthening relationships, which all three will be discussed thoroughly during the webinar. Below, you will find a link to a YouTube video, which is an introduction to the concepts of intergenerational learning. So if you're interested to learn more about it, go ahead and click on the link. Now, what are some examples of intergenerational learning? The first example could be where the younger generation teaches the older generation about technology, since technology is very prevalent in today's age, and older generations may not have the same skills and or exposure to technology as younger generations do. An intergenerational learning example would be the teaching of technology from younger to older generations. On the contrary, another example of intergenerational learning could be that older generations or older adults share their life experiences with younger generations and younger individuals, therefore passing on different aspects such as cultures, traditions, some older way of thinking, etc. Now that we've had some sort of clear understanding of what intergenerational learning is, and we also gave some examples, let's see why it matters, especially in dementia care. To begin with, intergenerational learning matters especially in dementia care because it can create meaningful engagement. So people with dementia can greatly benefit by interacting with younger individuals because not only does it stimulate their memory, but it also creates emotional connections, and it can also provide a sense of purpose to the individuals who suffer from dementia. In addition, intergenerational learning can also overcome isolation because people with dementia tend to withdraw socially, and therefore having interactions with younger generations can stimulate this overcoming of an isolation and offer social engagement and combat feelings of loneliness. Finally, it also preserves identity because it gives the opportunity to older generations and people with dementia to share their life experiences and their skills and stories with younger individuals and younger generations. And this allows the individuals who have dementia to gain their sense of purpose and self back. Now, intergenerational learning, as I previously mentioned in the beginning, comes in different forms, and the spectrum of intergenerational learning comes as informal, can also be presented as community-based, and it can also be presented as formal intergenerational learning, each one with its different characteristics. Now let's get into the informal intergenerational learning. Now, some characteristics of informal intergenerational learning can be being spontaneous and unstructured. So it can be a very relaxed setting, a very relaxed plan that someone needs to follow. It can often occur between family members, so maybe a grandchild with a grandparent or a parent with a child. And it also sparks curiosity and it allows the individuals involved to share their common interests. Now, the second form of intergenerational learning is community-based. And some characteristics of community-based intergenerational learning are the involvement of partnerships among organizations. So it has a slightly more formal side to it. So it's a step above the informal because it does involve other actors. It is also preferred to be done in a community setting. So, for example, in a space within the community that both generations can come together. And some common activities of community-based intergenerational learning can be gardening, storytelling, music, theater, etc. And finally, characteristics of formal intergenerational learning, which is the third type of intergenerational learning in our spectrum that we saw before, are the following. Formal intergenerational learning almost always comes planned, so there's a very specific structure that needs to be followed during intergenerational learning activities, and it sometimes includes curricula. It is consistent over time and recurring, so it doesn't just happen once and then never again. It has a more recurring approach. And before formal intergenerational learning begins, there are set goals and objectives that are known to the participants that need to be achieved during intergenerational learning sessions. Now, this is an activity that can be given to someone to understand, to see if they understood what informal, community-based, and formal intergenerational learning are and their differences. So for example, some words like gardening will go under the community-based column. Words like planned will go under the formal column. Phrases such as between family members will go in the informal column, and so on and so forth. This is just a short activity to test if someone understood the different types of intergenerational learning. Now that we've covered a brief introduction of intergenerational learning, we're going to go more into the benefits of it. So intergenerational learning can be beneficial in different and many ways to all individuals involved. So both the younger generation and the older generation, and they can both gain significant things out of intergenerational learning. Now, some examples of benefits include cognitive, social, and emotional aspects. And below there is a YouTube video which leads to a podcast between the host and two guests, professionals who discuss into more detail the benefits of intergenerational practices. So if you're interested, please go ahead and click on the link. Now let's get more into the specifics of the cognitive benefits of intergenerational learning before we see the rest of the benefits. So cognitive benefits for adults can include the stimulation of memory, the encouragement of problem solving and critical thinking skills, the support of neuroplasticity. It also helps slow down cognitive decline, which is a very common aspect of dementia. And it can also increase attention span. Now, on the contrary, for younger participants, some cognitive benefits include the encouragement of empathy and active listening, which are very important skills for young individuals to have. It also improves their communication skills. It can enhance patience, attention, and focus, especially when in communication with an individual who belongs to the older generation or someone who has dementia. It also encourages lifelong learning and it also broadens their perspective, especially if the older generation shares stories, experiences, and skills with younger people during the practice. Now, moving on to the social benefits of intergenerational learning, again, can be both beneficial for the older and the younger generation and participants involved. And these benefits include the reduction of loneliness and isolation, which again, especially when dealing with dementia, isolation and loneliness are two very prominent characteristics that are seen in people with dementia. It also increases a sense of belonging, especially when there is mutual interaction and excitement between the two generations and participants. It also improves communication and active listening skills, which are very essential to both generations. It strengthens community ties because it brings community actors together. And it also offers a consistent and meaningful social engagement for both younger and older generations. Now, finally, we have the emotional aspect of intergenerational learning and some of its benefits, again, covering both older and younger generations, include the cultivation of empathy and compassion, which again are great soft skills for both older and younger individuals to have. It fosters a mutual appreciation and connection between participants. It helps reduce stress and improves mood. And it also increases the self-esteem and confidence, especially in older individuals who may not have the opportunity to share their life experiences and stories as much as they would like. So intergenerational practices and activities give that opportunity to them. Now that we've covered the benefits of intergenerational learning, we're going to move on to a topic known as the intergenerational solidarity. The definition of intergenerational solidarity is the following. It is practices and behaviors which create positive relationships among individuals from different generations, mostly within the family setting. Now, some key aspects of intergenerational solidarity are that it promotes mutual understanding between older and younger generations. It counters different stereotypes and more specifically the concept of ageism, so discrimination based on age, and it supports age-inclusive societies within the community and further, and it also strengthens the bonds within the family and within the community. Now below, as you can see, there is once again a link to a YouTube video which explains why intergenerational solidarity is important and why it's needed for creating a better and more welcoming society and community. Now let's see how intergenerational learning can also tie to social inclusion. So the two mostly go hand in hand, not only for all the things that we've mentioned in today's webinar, which are the different benefits, intergenerational solidarity, and so on, but it also provides other benefits, which are the following. It decreases marginalization of older people, especially older people who suffer from dementia. It provides visibility to people who may feel marginalized and excluded. Again, it combats ageism and promotes a more inclusive society. And it builds inclusive and empathetic communities, which is a great benefit for both younger and older generations. Now, some barriers that might be faced within intergenerational learning can be somewhat disruptive because there might be difficulty in communication between generations, especially if there's a large age gap and generation gap between participants. There might be times where there are very little things in common, making it difficult to communicate. There might be limitations in mobility, especially for older people. And again, the differences between generations between the participants. Even though we use technology as an example of what intergenerational learning could cover, technology may sometimes also be seen as a barrier, especially if participants from older generations are lacking extreme knowledge and skills on technology, which again might make it harder for communication. So all three challenges that we presented here are somewhat go together. However, there are ways to combat the challenges and barriers faced, and this comes with recommendations and some best practices. So, in order for intergenerational learning to be effective and give results to participants both from the older and younger generation, it needs to be intentional and it also needs to focus on each individual and each person separately. So, some recommendations include focusing on the participants' strengths. So, for example, if participants lean more towards the arts or more creative aspects such as music, storytelling, art, theater, etc. It can be good to focus on those strengths instead of somewhat making individuals practice something that they're not very comfortable with doing. Another recommendation could be to start with a small session, so a small group of people, and gradually increase the number of people present in the session. So first you get an idea, you test the water, you're able to read the room and see how the session is going, and then gradually expand. Another recommendation is to involve different actors within intergenerational settings. So include family members, include carers, because it's important, especially the individuals who are present in people with dementia's lives. It is important for them to be present in the setting as well, because they can also gain things, and then the older and younger generations and participants can also gain out of this collaboration. And then a final recommendation would be to stay consistent and focus on building and increasing the bonds between the participants. So not just focus on ticking the boxes or achieving the goals, but be more open to trying new things and see what works and doesn't, and change the practices and activities accordingly. Again, going back to the importance of having intergenerational learning being person-centered. Now, a very common activity which is used during intergenerational learning practices is known as the memory box. The memory box involves a box with different pictures in it where a participant from the older generation grabs a photo and reminisces back to the photo and starts telling a story of where the photo was set, who is in the photo, and just starts building their memory, bringing their memory back to that specific photo. Um, and the way this activity works is you pair a younger individual with an older individual, and you ask the two to explore the memory box, which contains objects such as photographs or maybe even recipes, vintage jewelry. So all things that can lead to a specific memory or a specific time for the older individual. And then the younger individual can have the opportunity to ask open-ended questions to the older participant in order to start communication and spark conversation and storytelling. And a very typical question that a younger individual can ask could be, what's the story behind this photograph? And this question, like mentioned before, will spark storytelling, will spark conversation, start working the memory of the older individual. and start building this relationship between the two participants. Now, to summarize today's webinar, it's important to go through some important key takeaways that have been mentioned today. And these are that intergenerational learning has the strength and the ability to bring individuals from different ages and generations together through common activities that enhance their learning, their understanding, and the concept of inclusion. Another key takeaway is that intergenerational learning has a spectrum and different types, which are informal, community-based, and formal. And we've been through some specific characteristics of each type. An additional key takeaway are the benefits of intergenerational learning, which include cognitive, social, and emotional benefits for both younger and older generations, and especially individuals with dementia. And finally, the importance of keeping in mind that even though intergenerational learning comes with a lot of benefits, it can also come with a lot of challenges, but challenges that can easily be overcome if intergenerational learning wants to promote this communication between generations and help the two come together. These are a list of the references used to create the webinar today. So thank you to everyone who watched our webinar on the introduction to intergenerational learning, and make sure to follow our project social media and stay tuned for more webinars coming out very soon on different topics. Thank you.